And I quote from the SAGE report, "The perceived level of threat needs to be increased using hard-hitting emotional messaging." And that's produced huge levels of anxiety within Scotland. And probably 90% of the people in Scotland are still fearing as a consequence of this happening. People with fragile mental health, they're in anxiety. They are really in trouble at the moment. And it's because of that policy of inducing fear in the population. And and that's one thing. And the other thing that the government has done, has decided in its wisdom that it should shut down anything that goes counter to their particular narrative. And so people like me and other people talking out against what's going on have been silenced. They've been ridiculed and they've been smeared. And in compliance in that, and going hand in glove with that, is the mainstream media. And they have an awful lot to answer for. And the question I'm going to ask now, is this a caring government? Is it doing its best for the Scottish people? Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the way in which the agenda has been manipulated. So at the beginning it was all about saving the NHS, but actually you may have noticed that it's morphed since then, and it's now all about eliminating the virus from Scotland. Do you know that? It's called the Zero COVID policy. And it's implemented by somebody who actually doesn't seem to have any experience in this area, but yet is in charge of the public health of Scotland. And it's a policy which has had absolutely no scrutiny, and it has not been passed by any people who've got any experience in this area. And a little thought will tell you that this Zero COVID policy is absolute nonsense. It should never have been placed in the first place. And I'll give you 4 particular reasons why that is the case. First of all, we know from genetic studies that this virus came in many different places in Scotland, and since then it's spread throughout Scotland. Okay, so it's widespread in the community. There is no way in which you could have a zero COVID policy because it's all over the place. This is only a policy which would have been of use at the very beginning, where we could just find 1 or 2 places where the virus had come in. We can't eliminate it. It's here. Yeah. The second thing I should say is that this virus, about 80% of people who have it are asymptomatic. So if you wanted to find out where the virus was, you have to actually test the whole of the population. And you have to test the whole of the population multiple times. Is that something which is a feasible option? Absolutely ridiculous. Of course it isn't a feasible option. The third thing is that the test we have for COVID-19, a PCR test, and I've run PCRs, I know about PCR tests. This PCR test does not tell us where we've got somebody who is infected with the virus. It tells us where we've got bits of the virus lying around, and they could be lying around 60 days after a person has been infected. And moreover, the test has a significant, you'll get positive rates when false positive rates, and the rate at which people are finding the so-called virus using these tests is about the same proportion of cases which we are actually finding in Scotland. So what we're actually finding may just be false positives. So there are real problems with that test. And lastly, I don't know if you've noticed, but actually Scotland is joined to England, and actually people move between England and Scotland. And I don't think we're yet an island. I don't know, maybe we're going to be cut off at some future point in the future, but I don't think it's possible, if you eliminated the virus from Scotland, to stop it from entering when other people came into this country, which I think we actually do need, because it's good to have visitors. So this zero COVID policy is no good for controlling the virus. But of course it's very good for controlling the population, and that's why it's in place. So if you want to lock down an area, what you do is you go and you do loads and loads of tests there. You find so-called cases, and we've heard what cases mean. It doesn't mean that there's infection there. And you find enough of them and you say, oh dear, we'll have to lock this place down. And that's what's happened to Aberdeen. A very spiteful move, in my opinion. And the other thing I'd like to say about this is that actually finding that people are asymptomatic and have the virus is probably a good thing to find, because actually what we want to do is the virus to spread throughout the whole of the population, for immunity to be gained in the whole of the population, and then we can bring out those people who are susceptible to COVID-19. So it's a complete twisting of the true situation and a complete misinterpretation. But it's very useful for controlling people, and it's why we're still in lockdown weeks and weeks after there have hardly been any cases, and it's destroying people's livelihoods, it's destroying people's lives. People who have in the performing arts, they haven't been able to perform for about 5 or 6 months. We've got businesses going bust, we've got whole people being laid off, we've got our education being destroyed, we've got bankruptcy, and we've got misery, because we've got people forced to wear these damned masks. And we're also not supposed to kind of have any kind of social contact with people. That's a bad thing. So I ask you, is this the action of a caring government? Okay, in a